Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. The New York Times has this webpage. How much hotter is your hometown than when you were born? I'm going to enter Detroit, Michigan in 1920. This is what comes up. Our data set goes back to 1960 when you were 40. Back then, the Detroit area could expect about 9 days per year to reach at least 90 degrees. I wonder why their data set only goes back to 1960. The United States has excellent temperature records going back to the late 19th century. Now let's scroll down a little bit further. They say, today the Detroit, Michigan area can expect 9 days at or above 90 degrees per year on average. That's the same number they gave for 1960. Now let's scroll down some more and look at their future projections. By the end of the century, models show that there could be 30 of these very hot days. The Detroit, Michigan area is likely to feel this extra heat even if countries take action to lower their greenhouse gas emissions. So there's been no increase in the number of hot days since 1960, but their models show that the number of hot days is going to start increasing very rapidly. They're making a prediction about the future which isn't supported by any available evidence. And they're tying their fake prediction to the burning of fossil fuels. Now let's look at what the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has to say about the climate of Michigan. They say, temperatures in Michigan have risen almost 3 degrees Fahrenheit since the beginning of the 20th century. Historically unprecedented warming is projected during this century. Extreme heat is a particular concern for densely populated urban areas such as Detroit, where high temperatures and high humidity can cause dangerous conditions. We've heard their propaganda, now let's look at their actual data. They show that the observed number of days over 90 degrees Fahrenheit in Michigan has sharply declined since the 1930s. And they show little change in the number of warm nights over 70 degrees Fahrenheit, with the warmest years being during the 1930s. The actual NOAA data for Michigan doesn't support NOAA's propaganda at all. In fact, the actual data shows the exact opposite of the propaganda. The number of 90-degree days in Michigan is down more than 50% since the 1930s. It's pretty easy to see why the New York Times hid all the data prior to 1960, because there were a lot more 90-degree days prior to 1960 than there has been since. As is normally the case, the New York Times is misleading and defrauding their readers. Now let's go to realclimatetools.com. This is Toto's newest website. Let's click on Daily Station Temperatures. What comes up is a graph of the annual average maximum temperature at Alabama going back to the 1880s. But I'm not interested in Alabama right now. What I want to look at is Michigan. Let's look at all of NOAA's daily temperature data for Michigan going back to the 1880s. What we're looking at here is a plot of more than 900,000 daily maximum temperatures recorded by NOAA for the state of Michigan. Let's do a search for what year they had the most days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. In 1895, Adrian, Michigan had 60 days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Now let's look at when Michigan had their longest stretch of consecutive days above 90 degrees. First, I'm going to hit the Reset Zoom button, and then I'm going to go back and select every station in Michigan. Now we're going to search for the longest stretch of days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. In 1921, Owasso, Michigan had 16 consecutive days above 90 degrees. Now let's look at every single 90-degree day recorded in Michigan by NOAA. Once again, I'm going to hit Reset Zoom and then select all of the stations in Michigan. I'm interested in all of the days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, so I'm going to enter 90 as being the minimum Y value. And I'm going to enter 112 degrees for the maximum. It becomes very clear that the hottest temperatures of the past were much higher than they are now. On July 13, 1936, Kalamazoo, Michigan reached 109 degrees Fahrenheit. 100-degree days in Michigan used to be fairly common, but they haven't had any since 2012. Now let's take a closer look at 1936. I'm going to enter 1936 for the minimum X, and I'm going to enter 1937 for the maximum X. I want to zoom out horizontally, so I'm going to click in the middle of the screen, press the H key on the keyboard, and turn the scroll wheel to make it zoom a little bit sideways. The stations in Michigan recorded 344 temperatures over 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And it was extremely hot from around July 8th through July 14th. Temperatures this hot are completely incomprehensible to people who live in Michigan now. During that 6-day period in 1936, people in Detroit were dying from the heat at a rate of 1 every 10 minutes. The chief medical examiner at the morgue said, "I've never seen anything like it in my 16 years of experience here." In 36 hours, he supervised 150 autopsies. NOAA's data is fine, but their key message is completely fake. High temperatures in Detroit were much worse 90 years ago than they are now. And the New York Times propaganda is even worse. They hid all the data before 1960. They made baseless predictions about the future. And then they blamed their completely imaginary story on the burning of fossil fuels. It makes people uncomfortable to believe that the newspapers and their government are defrauding them. But that's exactly what's going on. Toto's been barking about this for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie Caesar, Toki, and Upla on the web at realclimatescience.com.